convey this message to you in English as well. So allow me to speak in Shakespeare's language for 10 seconds.
There will be an English language translation for those people who do not understand Arabic. إذا الندوة باللغتين العربية
The
والإنجليزية عبر
webinar is English and Arabic through Zoom.
الآن لكل
So
من
please,
يريد المشاركة
whoever would like
يدخل
to
على
join,
الرابط
please
الذي تم
click on the link that has been
زوم.
provided
أيضا كذلك
on Zoom.
بالنسبة
Also,
لعدم
please, with
مشاركة
regard to
غير المشاركين في هذه
the
الندوة معي
non-panelists here,
خلال متابعتكم
during the
للنقاش
webinar and following the
أن
discussion,
تطفئوا
please turn off
الميكروفونات
your microphones
والكاميرات
and your
على الجهاز
cameras
الذي تستخدمونه
on the
إلى يقين
computer you are using until
مشاركتكم
you can
أسئلة
uh,
أو أي
participate
ما
through
كان
Q&A or if there is any intervention.
أحاور
I
في هذه
will
المناسبة
have as panelists, my name is Abdurrahim Fuqara, and I am director of Al Jazeera in the Americas, office in the Americas. I am honored and pleased to moderate this panel discussion in which we have Jihad Azour, Director of IMF Middle East and Central Asia Department in the International Monetary Fund,
سيكون معنا
and
من
we will have
السودان
from the
السيد
Sudan
محمد أحمد
Mr.
بشرى
Mohammed
بدوي
Ahmad
الذي
Bushra
يرأس
Badawi, Deputy
بنك
Governor
السودان
of
المركزي
the Central Bank of Sudan. And we may also have with us, and will be honored to have Mr. Amin Saleh Yassin, Under Secretary for Economic Planning and Under Secretary of the Ministry of Finance in the Sudan. Also, we have here in this webinar Ruba Jaradat, Assistant Director General and Regional Director for Arab States in the International Labour Organization. She will join us from Jordan. And also we have here, I would like to welcome Nisreen Jelaila, or as they say in Morocco, Nisreen Jlaila, Director of Al Bawsala, joining us from Tunisia, Green Tunisia. Welcome you all. I will have as panelists here for about 30 minutes. Then we will start to have your questions and your comments as I get them in order to pose them on the panelists. I would like to remind you once again that you have a link to access the webinar through Zoom, and there is interpretation into English because discussion is in Arabic and English on Zoom. And you have also hashtag MENA, hashtag for whoever would like to follow up. Also, there is live webcast through different platforms, social media platforms of the International Monetary Fund or other institutions such as Al Jazeera Network. Welcome you all. Welcome to the panelists in this discussion. Jihad Azour, I would like to start with you because this discussion it's in your institution. Mr. Abdul Rahim, he is the Deputy Governor of the Governor of Sudan. Mr. Saleh Yassin, Under Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, has joined this meeting now. Mr. Amin Saleh Yassin, we would like to welcome you in this meeting. Thank you for participating with us today. We are pleased to have you here today. Jihad Azour, I wanted to ask you, since this issue and subject is related to the paper prepared by the International Monetary Fund on social um, spending for inclusive growth in the Middle East and North Africa. So what is meant, or what is the definition of social spending? What is the definition of social spending? Good morning. Thank you for this introduction. In fact, in brief, I answer your question. Social spending means three main sectors that include under social work: health expenditure, health spending, spending on different levels, spending that is related to the social protection system, especially that which is related to people in need, people who have special needs, or those are who are marginalized, and also spending on education, which is the backbone of social spending. Three main pillars for social spending, under which we have public work and also social spending, which aims at improving the level of social growth and development, and also aims at increasing the level of welfare, and also aims at increasing the level of participation and inclusion in the economy. So, is it possible now to talk to Mr. Amin Saleh Yassin? Mr. Yassin, with regards to you in the Sudan, and based on this definition that we just heard from Mr. Azur from the International Monetary Fund, what are the problems? What are the issues that we can consider that they are being discussed, and you have solutions for these problems? And what are the issues that are being discussed and you feel as a government that it is difficult to solve for the time being?
سيد ياسين
Mr. Yassin, please turn on your microphone.
سيد ياسين ميكروفونك مطفي.
Mr. Yassin, your microphone is off. Could you please turn it on?
طيب في انتظار أن
Okay, until this issue is being solved, maybe there is an issue with the microphone on Mr. Yassin's side. Until this issue is solved, now we would like to turn to Roba Jaradat, the Assistant Director.
تفضل تفضل.
Proceed. Yes, please go ahead. Roba will get back to you later. I am pleased to have you here and to meet you all in this webinar, and we wish you all to be in good health. In fact, social spending, public social spending, as Jihad Azor mentioned, is one of the main issues that is related to macroeconomy in the different countries, and most of the countries, they provide this kind of support, such as providing subsidy, fuel subsidy, food subsidy, and this takes a large part of the resources apart from health and education. So subsidy in its form here in Sudan represents about 50% of public spending to subsidize goods for everybody, and it's not targeted to the poor in an accurate way, which means that there are very few resources that are being provided to the poor to provide them with education, healthcare, and also targeted towards other social issues. So a reform of this system of subsidy is very important. It has to be a priority in order to restructure this subsidy to be directed and targeted to the poor, either directly or in the form of projects that are also targeted to the poor, and to have those available resources from the public finances in order to have our objectives. We are supposed to target this subsidy subsidy for all goods, fuel, and oil and the like helps increasing the issues of inflation, and they have adverse impacts on other productive sectors. We in the Sudan here, we have resources that are being provided in the form of universal subsidy, and it's not targeted to the poor specifically. We need to reform this system so that we have programs from fiscal programs I meant to provide support to the poor. There is another aspect related to the exchange rate policy. So maybe there is an intervention by my colleague on this issue. We'll get back to you now. We would like to ask Mr. Yassin, because you spoke about me, about the poor. That's my last name, Fuqara. I would like now to move to Dr. Osama Kanaan, the director of the International Monetary Fund's Middle East Center for Economics and Finance based in Kuwait. Dr. Osama Kanaan, you are based in Kuwait, and Kuwait is in the Gulf region. And when we speak about the Gulf region, as a matter of fact, we speak about certain levels of income and social spending and the like. How, in your point of view, you see the differences that do exist in the Middle East and North Africa with regards to social spending? Um, Thank you, Mr. Abdulrahim. I would like, first of all, to give an overview about the center and about its work. First of all, I would like to extend my thanks to Jihad Azour, director of MCD in the IMF, for inviting the IMF's Middle East Center for Economics and Finance, and its alumni. There are many alumni of the center that are joining in this webinar. Thank you for inviting us to join here to cover one of the core policy issues that are facing the Arab world. And many of you have already participated in the courses organized by the center, which is the main training center in economics and finance in the Arab region. Also, I would like to thank the state of Kuwait that hosts the center, because it has provided the support to the center since its inception in 2011, and we have about 11,000 policymakers from throughout the world that have been trained at the center. This is a general idea about the center. And since last spring, we have been keen on expanding the program of online and interactive virtual training, including courses that cover the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and the way forward and recovery from the pandemic and its impact. An overarching theme in that program is the paramount role of social spending in sustaining inclusive growth, as brought to the fore in the recently released paper by the IMF. In that regard, our training program has pursued a multidisciplinary approach on collaboration with regional and international institutions to support policymakers in designing and implementing different topics, and to reduce poverty, uh, strengthen governance, increase transparency and accountability, and curb corruption. And we focus on certain issues we have been focusing on in the last two courses, that is reducing poverty and unemployment, as well as enhancing governance in the region and in the GCC countries. So I look forward to seeing you again in our events, and I would like to invite you to see the program that is available on the website. And we are keen that the recommendations brought forth by this webinar will further add to the knowledge and skills needed for inclusive development in the region. Thank you very much. Thank you, Abdurrahim.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very
أود
much.
أن أعود إلى
I would like to
ربى
get back to
جرادات
Ruba
المدير العام
Jaradat,
المساعد والمدير
the
الإقليمي للشؤون
Assistant
العربية في منظمة
uh,
العمل الدولي
Director
في
General
الأردن. ربى جرادات
and Regional
في
Director
كيف
for Arab States from the ILO
ترى
from Jordan.
العلاقات
Roba, in your point of view, how do you see
في منطقة
social spending
الشرق الأوسط
in the Middle
في ظل
East in
التحديات
light of the
التي
challenges
يواجهها قطاع العمل
faced by the labor sector now,
اقتصاديا
not
حتى في
only from the economic
الأزمة
point of view, but also
العالمية
in light of
دكتور أسامة.
COVID-19 pandemic, as we just heard from Dr. Osama. Thank you, Abdulrahim. On the occasion, by the way, I'm in Beirut. I'm originally from Jordan, but our office is based in Beirut. Allow me, please, to extend my thanks to the International Monetary Fund for organizing this important webinar. It is obvious to us all that the strategy of recovery is important, and it needs fairness for economic recovery, and also to support social justice is important. COVID-19 has uh, caused damage to the labor market in most of the Arab countries, according to our estimates in the ILO and the sixth edition of COVID-19 publication. Our estimates show that 19.5% of working hours have been lost in 2020 in the Arab countries, and this is equivalent to 23 million hours full-time work. The Arab region is one of the regions that has discrepancies, and COVID has led to that discrepancy and exacerbated it. This shows that the impact of the pandemic led to losses of jobs in the unofficial market and low-skilled labor, among low-skilled labor. The women in this regard, and in light of corona, they have had different experiences as the discrepancy and the variety we have at the level of the Arab world. According to research by the ILO, they showed that the five main sectors of employing women, which are education, health, general management, agriculture, and retail trade, they have been affected significantly by the pandemic. And I would give an example from the health sector. For example, 70% of the staff are women in the health sector, and these have been influenced in different manners. Women have been affected, for example, health staff, health workers have been on the front lines. They have been affected by COVID, and they lack protection in some cases. They are been working for longer hours, and there is also a deterioration in the services on which women depend in order to to have work-life balance, such as closing the daycare for kids, closing schools, and some of men, they work from home, and this depends on the willingness of husbands to help their wives. We at the ILO, we have good experience supporting the government of Jordan, for example, by providing support and providing social um, support, and in other fields also keeping daycare open. These procedures have helped supporting women, and I believe we need to expand that and not to limit it to Jordan. But there is one point that I would like to underscore. It's the important link between social spending and creating jobs, because these are linked together. Um, the Arab economies, they need diversification of production, more value added, and this would allow all private sector and firms and employees to work and to operate and be active. Also, I would like to focus on the fact that social spending is an important incentive for transformational, structural transformation in the region. We need to improve spending. For example, the increasing levels of educational attainment are not translated into better work opportunities and jobs and employment for the youth. So I believe that encouraging women to participate in science, technology, engineering, mathematics is very important and is essential to increase their participation in the labor market that is changing very quickly. Thank you, Roba. And I would like to remind you once again, you are in Beirut, not in Jordan, but that's my error mistake because we mentioned Jordan and the names of other countries. They are all
نسرين
wonderful
جلالية
names.
في تونس
Nesrine Jalalia in
مديرة
Tunisia,
البوصلة
director of Al
في
Bawsala
البداية
newspaper. At the outset, Jihad Azur spoke about
مسألة الإنفاق الاجتماعي
social
مثلا
spending and what has been attained in the region and the
والتحديات
challenges that
المنطقة
are being
خاصة
faced by the
على
region,
مدى القرنين
especially
الماضيين.
over the past
ما
two
هي
decades.
تجربة
What is
تونس
the experience
وكيف
of
توصلت
Tunisia? How about
التغييرات
Tunisia's experience? And
السياسية
Tunisia has been witnessing
في
deep
السنوات
political
الماضية؟
changes in the
ما
past
هي
two
تجربة
decades.
تونس في
How
المنطقة
about the
هذه
experience
المجالات؟
of Tunisia from your point
الفرص
of view
والتحديات.
with regard to social spending? are
شكرا.
the
قبل أن أبدأ
opportunities
أود
and
أن
the
أشكر
challenges?
صندوق
Thank you
النقد
very much.
الدولي
Thank you. I would like to thank the International
لإعطائنا هذه
Monetary Fund
الفرصة لتمثيل
for
المجتمع
giving us
المدني
this opportunity
في
as
في هذا
representatives of the
المحور
social
المهم جدا.
civil
في الحقيقة
society
ونحن
to
بصدد
participate in
إقامة
this
هذه
webinar. As
الندوة
we are
الافتراضية،
about to
هنالك يوم
hold
غضب
this
في تونس
webinar, there
ينظمه
is an
الأطباء
anger day
والممرضين
by the physicians and
وجميع العاملين في قطاع
nurses
الصحة
in
إثر
Tunisia and
حادث
all
مؤلم
the
أودى
working
بحياة
in
طبيب مقيم في
the
مستشفى منطقة
medical
داخلية القصرين.
sector because some
سقط
staff
في
have
هوة المصعد الذي
died
لم تتم صيانته.
died because of
المسؤول
an
على الصيانة
accident
في
in the
المستشفى
elevator
أحيل على
because the
التقاعد
person
في
who is
شهر 7
taking care of the
ولم
maintenance
تتم
of the elevator has taken
ولم يتم
pension
تغييره معناها
in
أو
July and he has not been
تبديله.
replaced, so there was
لم
no
يتم تعويض
maintenance.
العام المسؤول.
And
وهذا
this
يلخص
shows
بشكل
and
كبير
summarizes
اللي قاعدين عايشين فيه في
how
تونس
we the
في
way
مجالات
how we live.
الإنفاق
And
الاجتماعي. في حقيقة
in
الأمر أنا
regards to
طلعت على
social
التقرير
spending, in
وشفت أن
fact, I
هنالك
have
التقرير
read a
يرجع
report, and this report
للثلاث عقود الماضية،
goes back to 3
ولكن
decades
هنالك
back.
العديد من
But
الأشياء تغيرت
there
في
are so
الثلاث
many
عقود.
things that have changed
وأريد أن ننوه
throughout
شوية
the 3 decades. I would
أو
like to
أنسب
point
شوية
out to
المسألة متاع الإنفاق
the
الاجتماعي
issue
في
that has
تونس
to
في
do with
الفترة متاع
social
العشر
spending
سنوات
in Tunisia
اللي
over
فاتت،
the past 10
خاصة
years,
ما
especially
كشف
what
المستور
has
الذي
been
كشف بعد
disclosed
جائحة كورونا.
after
تونس هي دولة
COVID-19 pandemic.
بعد
Tunisia
الاستقلال
is a
دولة
country after
اجتماعية بامتياز،
independence
والدولة الاجتماعية هي
is
التي
a country that cares about the
خولت
society.
البلاد أن ترتقي ويكون
Yeah, this
عندها
enabled the
مؤشرات
country to
النمو
develop and
الاجتماعي
to
اللي
have
نعرفوها
indicators of
من
social
دي- من
growth
تد-
through
من
what
تعليم،
and what we know
من
as education,
الشغل، من حقوق
employment,
المرأة، من
women
الصحة.
rights, and health.
ولكن في
But
بداية من آخر الثمانينات
starting
بدأ
end of the
التقهقر، وممكن
80s, there
نذكر بعض
was a
الأرقام حتى
setback. We can
للمشاهدين
mention
الكل
some of the
يمكن
numbers so that
يفهموهم،
the
ما
audience
هيش
would be
أرقام
able to
تقنية جدا.
understand the numbers that are
مثلا في
not very
تونس
technical. For example,
في
in
مجال
Tunisia, in
الصحة،
health
لما
sector,
منظمة الصحة العالمية
when
تقول
the WHO says
ميزانية أو موازنة
that
وزارة
the
الصحة لازم
budget
تكون
of the
15% من
Ministry of
موازنة
Health
الدولة،
should be
احنا لم
15%
تتعدى
of the state
6%،
budget. We did
عمرها
not
ما
exceed
تعدت 6%
6%.
من
We
موازنة
never
الدولة.
exceeded 6%
لما
of the state
هنالك
budget when
المعدل
there is
العالمي
a rate, the
لإنفاق
world
الدولة على
average
الفرد
for
في
spending,
مجال الصحة يكون
spending on
16
individuals per capita.
610 دولار، في
Spending
تونس
is
هو
in
145 دولار.
Tunisia is
هذا إنفاق الدولة على الفرد،
145. This is
في
the
حين أنه
45
إنفاق الفرد
state
على نفسه
spending,
في صحته هو ضعف
whereas
المعدل
out
العالمي.
of pocket is
في
double
تونس
the
كذلك
global average.
نلقاو
In Tunisia
نجد
as well, we find
تقريبا 100
that
ألف طفل
there is
وطفلة
about 1,000
وينقطعون على الدراسة
child
كل سنة. هذا
who
حسب منظمة اليونيسف.
withdraw from schools. This is as per the UNICEF. But the state did not do anything in order to accommodate these kids who draw from schools. And they do not enroll in schools due to poverty. They need to work to support the family. But if we try to talk about growth, about universal growth, about inclusive growth, 100,000 kids that withdraw from schools, and the state is not supporting and is not increasing or even trying to invest, to spend on education in a better way. On the contrary, this is, I go back to this accident and we see what has happened in Tunisia since the revolution and maybe before. These are accumulations. In fact, these are accumulations. There is lack of investment. There is absence of political stability. As a matter of fact, there is shrinkage, no digitalization. There is corruption, dictatorship until now, and until now we have not combated that seriously by, frankly speaking, by the 10 governments that we had all this period. But there are options, there are political options in terms of health, education, and
في مجال الإنفاق
in spending, social spending, I meant actually.
لما الدولة تقرر أن تبقي على بعض المستشفيات بدون إطار طبي، لما تقرر أن تقلص جدا في الاستثمار في مجال الصحة وفي مجال التعليم، لما تقرر أن تتيح الفرصة للخواص حتى نمحيو مجال الصحة العمومية ويبقى هذا للخواص.
There will not be space for the public health care. Now, the situation now under COVID-19 pandemic, we are facing a situation where we find that there is a very weak health infrastructure and social coverage. Nesreen, please allow me. We will get back to these issues as well as different issues that have been mentioned by the participants. Through the questions raised by the participant, Mr. Muhammad Ahmad Bushra Badawi, Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sudan, I would like to point out there is interpretation into English. Mr. Muhammad Ahmad Bushra Badawi, Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sudan. We have heard from Mr. Saleh, and he spoke about subsidy. So in light of the current situation and the economic situation in a country like the Sudan, what are the limits of providing assistance? How can the central bank provide assistance to the government in financing the deficit of the budget and also helping the government and government bodies to provide support to whoever is in need, whether in terms of healthcare or education, under the umbrella of social spending? Thank you, Mr. Abdul Rahim. At the outset, I would like to say that now the deputy governor, we have two deputy governors. The second deputy governor has joined us in this webinar. Welcome. With regards to the question, I would like to start with the issue that was raised by Amin Yassin, which is the role of exchange rate and the policies of exchange rate and its impact on attaining the objectives of social development and its relation with subsidy that can be provided or support that can be provided by the government, and also the role played by the central bank in financing the Ministry of Finance and its role in attaining a social development, balanced and inclusive social development. Exchange rate in the Sudan and the current situation in the Sudan, we find that we have different exchange rates, multiple exchange rates. There is the free exchange rate, free market rate, or black market, and the official market that is adopted by the central bank. When we also have another rate, which is the customs dollar, which is used in assessing the value of imports in order to impose custom fees and other taxes on imports. This is one of the main issues that we have here that is affecting the economy of the Sudan and led to deepening the structural imbalances. And this is one of the needs of the program, one of the priorities of the economic reform program that we agreed when we have with the International Monetary Fund. The main objective is to have one exchange rate and to make it flexible exchange rate for some time, and then to be free completely so that it will reflect the real exchange rate. Now, in light of having multiple exchange rates, this made the central bank overburdened with financial burdens because the central bank needs to provide foreign currency for government units in order to purchase strategic commodities based on the official exchange rate. Therefore, the difference between the official exchange rate and the exchange rate in the market, because most of the revenue of the central bank for a long time has been from revenue of exporting gold through the central bank. This created an adverse influence on the economy, and now the budget of the central bank bears part of the overall headline deficit, and this has led to inflation and imbalance in injecting domestic currency in the market, which led to inflation and more deterioration in the exchange market. All this has been reflected negatively on the different social aspects and the social situation. In fact, exchange rate that has been adopted so far is not acceptable because we have multiple exchange rates, and these lead to more imbalances and they hinder the program needed in order to deepen growth and expand the base of inclusive growth. Therefore, we wish that in the coming period, by the end of December 2020, we'll be able to have a free exchange rate as agreed with the International Monetary Fund under the program followed up by the International Monetary Fund. Please allow me, Mr. Badawi, regarding this point, if please, I would like to have some questions from the participants in this webinar. We have a question related to this issue, and I would like to raise this question. The question is for Azur, and the person who posed the question, his name is Adel. This is his name on Zoom. How can we organize spending or assistance at the local level so that the beneficiaries would not benefit twice, and this will not affect the public finances in light of Corona? Having UNRWA and civil society organizations, other parties providing assistance. Mr. Azur, is there a certain attitude at the International Monetary Fund regarding this?
That's an important question because it's part of the study made by the IMF. It looks at not only the volume of spending by its efficiency. Social spending is meant to achieve an objective, and the key questions now is how to achieve the benefit of the social spending and how to ameliorate social spending. This depends on two things: the volume of spending, how it is distributed, and how it is targeted. Does it target the categories of population that would be meant to change in their situation? And this is very important and paramount, because part of the social spending comes from the public spending. Its efficiency depends mainly on the targeting issue, and Ruba and Nasreen in their interventions talked about this at length. Another part is the institutional efficiency, which means that the spending serves the key objective. And Nasreen gave the example of the investment spending on the health sector, which is highlighted by COVID-19 pandemic. So there was a real life test which made the weaknesses emerge. Another aspect, it is institutional in nature. The social spending, which is part of a bigger objective, i.e. improving the social environment, dealing with the socioeconomic imbalances, and promoting the community to be better, to provide more job opportunities, social protection, more participation of women and youth. And these are standards or criteria that need to be considered. Another additional point that we need to consider in the Arab region is the existence of multiple institutions that are working on social spending or social subsidies. Outside the state borders, there are NGOs, INGOs, and other, but the role of the state is paramount. The role of the state cannot be dispensed with. It cannot be replaced by the role of any other institution. That's why we focus on the importance of social spending to be part of the general public spending framework due to its importance and the need of the society and the need of the economy to it. And this issue is not efficiently highlighted, and especially in the post-COVID-19 pandemic. As Ruba said, promotion in the post-COVID should be paramount and considered seriously. We shall not promote our communities unless we invest in our human resources, which require more spending on human capacity, on training. We cannot also maintain or secure social stability unless there are efficient spending that can cover all the population. And so the nutshell of this study is to confirm the social cost or social spending, not only its volume, but its efficiency and its targeting. In addition to this, let me go back to Mr. Amin Saleh Al Yassin and his question. Mr. Yassin, in Sudan, like the rest of the countries in the region, and according to the current situation, there are huge, tremendous economic challenges. How can a country like the Sudan be able to deal with the issue of the social spending as being an important factor amidst COVID-19 and amidst its economic hardships that it is witnessing at the moment? Mr. Yassin. Thank you, Mr. Abdulrahman, for this important question indeed. The Sudanese economy is passing through an interim period from a military rule and a democratic transformation or transition, and this in itself poses a huge threat or challenge rather. The economy was suffering huge structural imbalances, stability at home, and then COVID-19 pandemic was erupted, and this aggravated or deepened the economic issues and problems of the Sudan. And this was compounded by a series of floods that affected adversely the productivity sector and reduced production. So it's a problem that faced the economy very tremendously. And amidst these circumstances, the government is trying to achieve an economic structural transformation, reallocations of provisions and the resources in order to mitigate the risks and the distresses, the financial distresses on the individuals, especially rural individuals and the poor categories. The government is also trying to provide direct cash flows to a certain category of households through the distribution of these allocations in a way that would allow the poor categories to have lesser household economic challenges. This is one of the mechanisms employed by the government to help mitigate the risks on the poorer communities in the Sudan. Ruba, if we get back to Ruba Jaradat in Beirut, regarding the labor sector, as you said at the beginning, there are accumulated challenges in the labor sector faced by the community, especially with regards to COVID-19 pandemic and its consequences. How can you find the funding to mitigate the burdens on the laborers in the region and to mitigate the risks and consequences of COVID-19? Are there certain entry points in the financial profile, for instance, resorting to lending, especially or including from the IMF? Is this a possibility? We know that many of the Arab countries region depend on subsidy, not only, or support, not only from the government, but other sources. How do you evaluate all these situations and matters? I don't know if Ruba Jaradat is still online. And yes, I heard your question and I unmuted myself now. If this crisis bears any positive consequences, it has uncovered the social aspects, that the solutions shall not be provided by the labor market only. What we need to have comprehensive social security networks that do not mitigate the poverty, but put an end to poverty. It is not a coincidence that the countries invested in the past in their social security networks, including social solidarity and social coverage, are now in a better position to face the consequences of COVID-19 pandemic. It is important to be aware that the providing social security from taxes also should be coupled with providing assistance to laborers. There is a shortage in social security provided to laborers in the informal sector. And those laborers need to have primary health care and protection against unemployment, etc. But because they are outside of the organized or formal sector, make them denied the access to these assistance. The countries, our countries do have disparities, huge disparities in their social spending or in their ability to provide social protection to their citizens. And I'm saying that in our region, countries are so close to austerity and austerity measures, especially at current moments. Hence, if we have like a sort of global solidarity and to have a multidisciplinary cooperation, like the G20 meeting concluded in Riyadh, to have a worldwide response to provide equitable and sustainable funding for social security. But in addition to this, countries should implement tax reforms. For instance, corporate taxes, in order to guarantee that multilateral companies would pay taxes equitably, and taxes on income put an end or curb corruption, injustice, or distribution of income, etc. And I'll stop here. Now I would like to shift gears to Nisreen in Tunisia. And there is a question from one of our followers of this webinar to you, Nisreen. We took a question a while ago from Adel from Palestine. But now we have a question from Bader, or rather, I'm not sure if I received the questions. Badruddin, no, from Muhammad Ali Lutfi. He's saying he is the executive director of the International Organization of People with Special Needs and Handicaps, and he's the founder of a General Association of Handicaps, and he's based in New York. And this question was addressed to Mr. Saud. Anyway, there was a question on the partnership between the public and private sectors and technical support to be provided by international organizations in order to influence the growth rates and to increase VAT on services provided to individuals, with a focus on legislative efficiency that allow everybody to participate equitably. Unfortunately, this is not available now. This is from Salim in Mali, and the question is addressed to Nisreen Jalali. Actually, as Ruba said, to what extent the government is cooperating with the private sector. And this is what we have witnessed in Tunisia. Yes, there is huge shortage in taxes. Taxes are not equitable, and they are not imposed on private sector equitably. In Tunisia, we provide privileges, tax privileges to private firms, and so far we don't have a clear study on this. Also in Tunisia, there is tax evasion, and it's an issue. In 2019, it reached, according to government estimate, half of the budget of Tunisia was tax evasion. But there's also shortage in legislation. We do have a parliament, an amended parliament. What happens in this parliament? It's the people that are enacting legislation through the parliament. Yes, it's true, but over the years, taxation and financial and fiscal matters are always perceived as a technocratic thing. And the legislator or the lawmakers who are coming from the population, they are not efficient to deal with the fiscal and taxation matters, and they need to be trained. And due to the political instability, the administration is the one that imposes taxes legislation, although they don't have a clear vision. There is an absentiation or exclusion of technocratic category to put on tax laws. I do agree with Mr. Salim that there is shortage in legislative efficiency. Every time we have a parliament in place, and by the way, our journal, Al Mawsala, is monitoring closely how things are done in the parliament, and we have highlighted before that there is a lack in human and professional efficiency among legislators or MPs who could deal with investment matters, fiscal matters, and there is voting on budgets without discussing in details these budgets and whether they are efficient or not. And also there is an absence of the dialogue on the media and on media platforms to communicate with the public budgetary matters. Also, there is absence of education. People are generally ignorant about budgetary and fiscal matters. The civil society should play a role, and also other individuals should simplify fiscal matters and taxation matters to the public, at least in Tunisia. Now back to my previous question that was addressed by Muhammad Ali Lutfi, Executive Director of the International Organization for People with Special Needs and head of the Association of Handicaps based in New York. And his question to Mr. Jihad Azur: is it possible that you explain to us how the IMF is viewing this inclusive growth, and how would IMF would apply this concept on the most vulnerable or marginalized categories who are usually excluded from IMF plans? It's a long question, but let me stop here. I think that it is the main points of the question were stated. The key objective of this study is something that comes at the core of the work and function of the IMF in the past years and in the region, i.e. how to use policy tools, economic and fiscal tools and instruments to achieve key and clear objectives. One of the key objectives that we are currently working on or focusing on is inclusion. Due to the existence of situations or conditions, for instance, disparity, huge disparity in income. Second, bad targeting, lack of efficiency of fiscal matters. Some categories do not enjoy the protection through socioeconomic policies, do not benefit from the government policies. For instance, the handicapped, the youth. The rates of unemployment in the region among the youth is so high. And this is not only in limited income countries, but also in high income countries, and women participation. Hence, the IMF, through its programs, it aims to determine standards, such for instance, social spending floor, or as in the program made with Jordan, to have specialized programs to provide opportunities for women and guarantee their participation, to make sure that there is efficiency, transparency, curbing any kind of corruption. All these are key fundamental matters. In the post-COVID pandemic, stage will be very sensitive. That's why if we are invited to go back and review what happened, we are invited to go back and review what happened during this time. The countries of the region should protect their individuals and put in place programs that were not there in the past. For instance, Morocco was able to secure 5 million employees in the informal sector through very simple tools or instruments. Other countries were able to develop technological tools to expand the scope of protection. What we need to focus on in the coming stage is to lower the gap between the able and disabled, empower the categories that cannot access education easily, provide them trainings, provide them easy access to trainings and education. The level of tele or virtual participation is also important. Women empowerment, women's ability to participate is much less than men. That's why we are facing a destiny or a fatal matter. We need to review the fiscal policy as a whole, including the taxation policy. And this is a point that Nesreen highlighted. We want to create more social equity. That's why, as said, this is one of the fundamental pillars of macroeconomic and social policies. We should not look at the size or volume only, but on the efficiency. Well, for the taxation matter, I want to address my question to one of my two guests in the Sudan. However, before this, I received a question from Mohammed Jesti on Facebook. As we are speaking of social spending, what is the futuristic view or perspective to solve third world countries from the imposition of external debts? I don't want you to speak about the third world countries, but I want you to focus rather on the Sudan in particular. What is the future perspective of Sudan towards external debts amidst the current circumstances in the Sudan, whether when it comes to economy or COVID-19 pandemic, and how you are dealing with it? Thank you, Mr. Abdulrahman. This is a complicated and highly intricate question. As for external debts in Sudan, as you know, they are non-sustainable debts, and Sudan is not able to pay these debts amidst the current circumstances. So we are now depending on the international community to help Sudan to find a way out from this old dilemma, which impede the Sudanese economy from achieving a breakthrough. Sudan currently is trying to put in place a strategic plan for the coming period and to agree with the IMF on some programs that include structural adjustments, deep structural adjustments and reforms, and preparation of the poverty-related strategy and its document. Sudan is also mobilizing resources from friends of Sudan and some international institutions in order to find a way out from this international crisis. And it comes within a huge political transition that Sudan was experiencing as we are now moving towards democracy. Sudan wants to delist its name from countries that are sponsoring terrorism. And it's now coexisting peacefully and with stability with all its partners, developmental partners and neighbors. So as we said, Sudan is moving towards different directions, and we really hope to be able to tackle these tremendous challenges within the scarcity of international resources, the need to have a good institutional buildup to develop the human capacity so that our country would be able to find a solution from all its challenges and problems. Mr. Mohammed Ahmed Bushra Badawi, we talked previously about the intersection between financing the budget deficit and the social spending issue. From your position at the Central Bank of Sudan, do you think that there is an intersection between financing budget deficit and dealing with social issues in Sudan and the taxation matter? Taxpayers in Sudan would be able to pay taxes at present and to be able to help and mitigate the social burdens on the citizens? Thank you very much. I'm the second deputy CBS governor. I would like to extend to you greetings of Mr. Mohammed Bushra, who is committed at the Ministry of Finance in another meeting. As regards monetization, of course, this creates burdens, inflationary burdens, and this affects the cost of services, whether directed to education or health. But at the Central Bank of the Sudan, we play a role in financing or providing social spending. And we always resort to policy directions. We direct our policies to this target, and we made lots of effort that would serve education, health. We also have a strategy of microfinance in place because we are giving due attention to marginalized individuals and vulnerable categories. We are interested in women graduates, fresh graduates. Economic liberalization policies and structural programs usually have adverse effects and create hardships on the vulnerable categories. It is true. Hence, they should be met with social security networks and social protection networks. And this is very costly on the government of the Sudan. And hence, the formal role is limited compared to the civil society. As for taxation, also it is affected. Social activities such as education and health are mainly commercialized, and they need taxes to finance them. As my brother, Mr. Amin, said, the external debt of Sudan, they are huge, and they affected Sudan in achieving a breakthrough in its programs. Although we met the technical requirements, but the political requirements are still preventing us from benefiting. But in the coming days, there are some promising news, and Sudan would play a role in the international system, and this would help us and alleviate the burdens of our debt and make us continue our programs sustainably. Thank you so much, sir, and for your participation in this webinar. Due thanks to Mr. Amin Saleh Yassin as well, and Mr. Muhammad Ahmed Bushra Badawi. I also like to extend my thanks to Dr. Osama Kanain, who took part at the beginning of this webinar. My deep appreciation to Mr. Jihad Azour, Director of MCD, Ms. Ruba Jaradat, Assistant Director General of Arab countries at ILO, to Ms. Nesreen Jalali, Head of El Bawsala newspaper in Tunisia, at the conclusion of this webinar on social spending to achieve inclusive growth in the Middle East region, which is organized by the IMF in Washington, D.C. My greetings to you. I am Abdulrahim Al-Fuqara from Al Jazeera Network, and at the conclusion of this webinar. Thank you all.